Hello and good evening, good morning, good night, everybody. Pleasure to see the big audience on this Webex screencast. It's a pleasure having you here to discuss the end-to-end monitoring in a MuleSoft environment. As Birgit pointed out, we're going to have a very brief agenda, short introduction about who integration matters are, our vision on process insights for the digital enterprise, and then we have a real online demo on what our vision is, how to monitor MuleSoft flows end-to-end in a larger environment. And after that, we have the Q&A, so use the chat window wisely and a lot, and type in all your questions there. Integration Matters has been founded roughly 12 years ago as a technology company, mainly doing consulting services in the EAI space. And we deliver projects to mainly European Fortune 500 customers. The largest organizations in Europe are our customers. We are privately owned, and we just have moved our headquarters to Hattingen, which is right in the center, in the heart of the Ruhr Valley. And we have sales representative offices in London and in New York. We are recognized as a global player when it comes to end-to-end monitor process insights or deliver process insights. Just last year, we won the Stevie Award in Germany for new technologies. And as of today, we have roughly 300 major corporations in our customer base from all different verticals. So as you see, 6 out of 20 top global finance companies belong to our customer base. 2 of the top 20 Indian pharma companies, and so on. So you see our solution is not really a vertical solution, but we are horizontal across all industries, across all technologies. We are applied globally to all companies that require real-time process insights into their environments. Our mission is that we want to drive business excellence in our customer base by providing the best possible operational visibility available in the market. From our history as a consulting agency for delivering integration services, we have learned that a lot of our customers have to develop their own logging and monitoring solution over and over again when they do integration projects. And for every different technology they had to implement that monitoring and logging and error handling again and again. From that experience for the past 12 years, we created a solution that we now market for more than 5 years to give an off-the-shelf, ready-to-use, zero configuration tool that automatically reads your processes and will attach to your transactional data and make all that available to your both technical user base and business user base for easy querying of the business transactions and making them available in no time. What we mean by that is just imagine a UI you can go to and throw in your purchase order number, your article number, your customer number, and at your fingertips immediately you will see all the transactions that dealt with that search key, regardless of which technology this was implemented in which data center the operation ran, whether it was a distributed transaction, business transaction, or locally, whether it was executed in the cloud or on-premise, in a massive ERP system, in a small custom-built Java application. It doesn't really matter. You just log into a solution, you type in your search key, and all the transactions that match that search key will show up, including all their correlated instances. A little screenshot I have here is a sample screenshot of our nJAMS 4 product with having mule flows being monitored here. So you see the flow diagrams as we display them, including the transactions that have been executed in the mule environment. And even you see correlated flows of mule technology or other technologies that all supported the business process and that have been correlated by a common key, and they form your end-to-end business process. Being able to collect all this transactional data and that business information data along the chain of your business process execution will then in the next step allow you to build your own custom dashboards to report on your business KPIs and SLAs. Another sample screenshot of our tool where out of the box we give you, based on the data that is collected, the availability of your business processes and your technical processes, your average response times, and we automatically compare that with the previous historic reporting period. So, for example, if you want to see like the last 24 hours, then we also give you a trend analysis versus the previous 24 hours, whether you're doing better or worse compared to that previous period. Having this all in one place, having this all in one application will allow you to rapidly and immediately answer all questions around where a business process is stuck, whether it succeeded or not, what the most dominant error code may be, why a transaction failed, and so much more. A brief move to architecture on how we achieve all these gains. At the center of our architecture is our nJAMS server. The nJAMS server is a web application that can be deployed both in the cloud or on-premise, and it receives monitoring events or logging events from our clients, which we build and make available to you to easily instrument and read all the transactional data from the most popular integration suites and other enterprise applications out there. The data is collected and forwarded via nJAMS and then stored in our data store and made available for full text search and retrieval and presentation with role-based access control in a web browser. I've just been notified that I'm a bit too soft in my voice. I try to speak up. I hope you can understand me better now. With that architecture in mind, let me just jump into my online demo on what our vision is on how you should monitor your Mule flow executions. I bring up a very simple example. All of you have seen an XML markup of a Mule flow, probably familiar with this sort of markup, and you know you can, in the famous Anypoint Studio, you can just click into the graphical representation and you see this. Now this is what the developer sees and how you create your stuff, and you would execute that, and then while you execute that you get a lot of log file entries. Now let me log in into nJAMS and show you what our vision is on how this should be presented to you. So here in my demo environment, what you see on the left side is all the various technologies that we are currently monitoring here in our labs in Hattingen, including the Mule. And I can expand the Mule and I see all the application servers that are currently supporting Mule. And within all these application servers, I see the various deployed applications with the service orchestration and choice routing, which is the sample which I just showed to you, being one of my selection I can make here. And when I click on that, right in the center of the screen, you will see all the executed transactions, including real-time transactions and the historic recorded transactions that have been executed within this application server now for that very engine. I can further drill down and see the individual flow definitions down here. And you can do that for all the technologies that we monitor, that you decide to monitor across all your data centers, across all your servers. By selecting any of these transactions, click on that, right on the right-hand side, let's use that one, you will get a graphical representation of the process execution. So if you look at this process diagram, for example, you will see that it exactly looks like the process diagram that you just have seen in the Anypoint Studio. And the green path in here is exactly the green path that has been taken when this transaction was executed. Now, what I can tell from my result set here is that obviously my audit service here is in trouble. It has a little red marker next to it, so let me just click on that, and see where the error happened. Immediately I'm highlighted here with that big red square, and I see an exception strategy has been executed and the default error handler has been invoked. Now why is that? And here's where nJAMS comes to your help, and you can simply bring up the recorded events for that flow, and you see the down here, you see the payload of the data that has been processed, and within the stack trace you see why the transaction failed, and that is simply because the database table I was trying to write to does not exist here. Now let me go back to the center of my screen here and check the audit service. And you see in front of that audit service there's a little green triangle, and a triangle means there are other processes that have been correlated with this flow. So let me talk you through this process so you better understand what that means. The whole process starts in a process called the order proxy. So we receive a HTTP request, and then we forward that, and we make another request. And this HTTP request will actually invoke another Mule flow in our scenario. And that might sit on a different server, in a different data center, in a different location. But nJAMS automatically correlates these, and I see the next step in my correlation chain is the order service. So this is a transaction that is completely executed out of process to the order proxy, and actually is this process diagram. And also you see here while the flow is executed that we dispatch the order that we posted via HTTP via JMS to a third engine. I can click on that activity. I can see the configuration of that activity, of that component. I can click on this one, and you see it changes to a different destination. And again, the process that is invoked by this JMS message is correlated automatically with my chain. And I can click on that, and I get my process diagram of that. So nJAMS will help you to stitch all these discrete processes together, automatically forward a correlation ID. So no matter in which technology really you implement your services, you will always have the full correlation chain at your hand and be able to immediately give an answer to the question on where your transaction sits and whether it succeeded or whether it failed. Now let me go back to the left side of the screen. I've talked about this technical hierarchy here, but we also allow you to search through your recorded business transactions using business services and business objects. So if you don't like the idea of your users having to know in which application server a transaction has been executed, or which application actually deals with which sort of business documents, you can simply list the services and objects here. And if you're interested into all order cancellations, you just click on the order cancellation object, and it will bring up all the transactions that have been recorded for order cancellations. On top of that, what you also can do is you can do a full text search. And I think we have spoon orders somewhere in the system. So just look for spoons, and the system automatically pulls out all the transactions that dealt with spoons. So when I actually open one of these transactions and I look into the payload data that has been recorded, I'm going to find the token spoon in there somewhere. I can have very complex queries up here. So for example, I can say, give me everything that has been started within the last 15 minutes. And that is just that query. It actually has to say greater than now minus 15 minutes, and which status is error. And then I don't get any hits because within my Mule, I don't have any errors, which is a good sign. So I'm a happy chap here. So very complex query language up here, full text search, Boolean expressions, everything you can ask for to find your transaction. So just imagine you put in your customer number, your purchase order number, and you're going to find it there. I have talked about reports. Now let me go to the reports page here. The built-in SLA dashboard allows you to immediately report on the availability of the applications that are sitting within the node you selected on the left-hand side in that tree? Or are you, if you're interested into the availability of your order object, just go to Objects, click on your business object, and you get a report, and you see your order objects have an uptime of 99%. So the processing is doing very well. You can click on any of these tiles to compare your current period against the previous reporting period. So this week is the bars, and we are much better this week than we used to be last week, which is the area chart in the background. So much more processing going on here in my order environment. Going back to my Mule environment, and seeing how well we do response time-wise and throughput-wise in our Mule environment. Now, this is just the built-in reporting dashboard. What you're always able to do is to customize your own dashboard, create custom charts, and make them available via extra pages, which you then grant access to different roles in your organization. So you probably want to create a head of line of business reporting dashboard. You can do that. Or you want to create a report page for certain services in your organization. You can do that and grant the privileges simply to the roles where you want to grant them to, where you need them. This is just a sample dashboard which we created to show you different ways on how you can chart out data of all the data you have been collecting using the platform. There is a section for rules. So now this looks like a scary, complex screen, but it's very simple indeed, actually. So you can create rules, for example, whenever a process is of status error, you want to create a follow-up, which is like an Outlook task, if you will, within the system, and you want to assign it to a certain user or to a certain role. You can use a templating language. Probably you want to send an email or post an HTTP request to some sort of other monitoring system, a HP Quality Center, iSinger, NAGDOS, whatever. Now, the other thing you can do is you can monitor interfaces for activity. So if you use this option in our rules engine, you can actually monitor that data is flowing through an interface in a given period of time. So if you have an interface where you know 24/7 it should receive transactions every minute, you can set up a rule and getting notified when your Mule flow isn't processing any data. And then investigate into the root cause, probably your B2B gateway is down or some of the infrastructure failed. So very powerful rules engine here that allows you to automate your monitoring. This is my very, very high-level view about what it looks like when you start monitoring your applications using nJAMS for Mule. Let me bring up another processing chain here where we have, I think this one has Mule with a bunch of other technologies in the chain, just to demonstrate again that you can use the nJAMS platform to monitor technologies across your enterprise and monitor your business process and deliver the insights to your customers internally and externally using this simple platform. So I have been asked to actually, in the chat window, people ask that I explain a bit more about the UI. So again, on the left-hand side, what you see is basically, let me collapse all that. You see 4 nodes. One is called processes. And within the processes, this is a very technical term. So you see domains of your applications. And a domain can be, for example, your Mule domain in which you have multiple application servers being deployed. Or you can have your SAP system as a domain, or you can have your Tomcat server as your domain, or you can have probably you run multiple ESBs inside your organization, which is not that uncommon. You probably have MuleSoft, and you run Camel or Software AG or TIBCO or all of these different ESBs out there. So you would see them here, and this is like the technical hierarchy of things. If you're not so much into technical stuff, you can organize your queries by services. So your customer service, for example, you click on that and you get all the transactions that dealt with customer service at the click on this. You can customize that. You can create your taxonomy. You can create your search strings in here. Very simple. So the same for the objects, just it's a different search vector, if you will. And remember the full text queries up here. You can create your own queries. So I have that query which should give me all the transactions that took longer than 1 second. So let me click on that, and you see this replace. And now I get all the transactions that run longer than a second. And I can click on these and investigate into those. And I can expand my query up here. I can check the history of my queries. I can save my favorite queries. I can make them available to other people in my organization, so I can share my favorite queries. For example, when I set up a very complex query, like give me everything that went wrong in SAP that dealt with SAP order numbers of that number range, which could be like a standard report you want to have in the early morning when you come into the office. You save that as a query. If you run on a small screen, I'm running on a full HD resolution here, you can simply collapse the screen on the left, and then it gives you the tree as a horizontal tree. That's what we say. So you can click on processes, and then you can navigate here to your Mule processes. Gives you just a bit more space. Now the whole UI is 100% customizable. So you can, as an administrator, you can define which sections of the screen or which plugins up here, which tabs should be available to your user base. Probably the process diagram is too complex to understand and scares the hell out of your manager. Simply disable that view and just display the events or the detail section down here. Within the process diagram, there's a few more things I really have to show you, which you can do. First of all, you can get the timings for every activity. So we see that my dispatch to the nJAMS server, it took roughly 2 seconds. Now, how well does that compare over time? I can click on that activity and bring up the activity statistics, and I see how often the activity has been called in the past and what the average duration of that activity is. And I see typically the average duration is like 45 milliseconds, which means that execution is very, very, very bad. Gives me just a good indication on how well my process is performing over time here. The thing I can do is I can actually interact with this process. And let me do this. Let me click on that activity and enable tracing here, and enable tracing here, and enable tracing here. And tracing means the next time this transaction is executed, we will record that very data that has been executed by that component for inspection. And the use case typically is when you deploy an application, things go pretty well. You've tested it, you developed it, and you bring it into production, and things work very well. But after time, you will see transactions probably failing, and typically it is because people start sending incorrect data structures. Your business partner, your business application, they change the format of the data or the content of the documents, and that is why your process fails. Now let me trigger one transaction in my backend here, and I just triggered a transaction. Probably will take a couple of seconds to come up in my nJAMS UI here. So let me clear that search and refresh, and we should get it any second from here. So here's the here's my transaction, the Audit Service, which I just created. And what you see here is, you see the little envelopes, and that is where we collected data. Now let me see this activity. This activity in Mule, it actually sets a session variable in this case. So I can now click on that Input tab. I selected the activity, then click on the Input tab, and I see all the data that was in scope when this component has been executed. I see the payload of the data that has been posted. I see the invocation scope here. So for those of you who are familiar with the scopes within Mule, I see the inbound scope. This is like the HTTP request. I see the outbound scope. I see the session scope. And the session scope, when this activity was started, was empty. Now, let's go to the Output tab, scroll down to the session scope, and we see the variable total value has been set to 0. So I can see what the data looked before the activity has been executed and after the activity has been executed. The same for this activity up here. When I send to the JMS message, I do the request and I see this is the output. This is the outcome, the return on that JMS message. I see the status here is accepted, for example. Now let me change my request, and let me change my request in a way that it will break. I just need to mess around with the data. Give me a second. So I submit, and then it will take a few seconds to pop up. And here it comes. So now what happened here is, let me find that thingy. I now send an order having two order items in it. And the first order item we see has been processed. It took the upper path in my process diagram. And because I sent two, this will iterate. This for each group or scope will iterate. And I can go to the next iteration, and it will highlight the path below and give me the information for the path below. And I can look into that data, and I see the different data that has been sent now for that one. Quite a powerful feature to see how iterations work. And bring up the in-house order process, which has been executed with my wrong order item. I see where it failed actually. So we see these are nested scopes. It failed in the CXF activity here, which means the enrichment failed, the caching failed. I can bring up the events and see why things failed. So this is very very powerful feature. So that probably just concludes my my little run through on what we do when we monitor Mule and how it works and how you can look into that and the nice things and the bad things about all that. And I see that like the chat window is full of questions. Birgit, do you want to coordinate the questions? Shall I go back to the PowerPoint presentation? How do you want to proceed from here?
Maybe we can answer the technical questions first. What generates the correlation ID?
Okay, the correlation ID actually is generated automatically by nJAMS. So it is a plain Java UUID, but you can override that. You can go here and you can configure rules in your flow by selecting an activity and then create a rule and say, I want to override my correlation ID because the correlation ID that nJAMS computed isn't good enough for me. I want to use a customer ID, or I want to use a transaction ID or a session ID, and then you can use that. You can just say property correlation ID. I want to use XPath to extract the correlation key from my payload or from my scopes within Mule, and then nJAMS will use that correlation ID and forward that correlation ID to the subsequent processes.
Thank you, Hendrik. So the next one, what do I need to configure on the Mule runtime or in the Mule app to enable nJAMS to capture data?
Yes, that is very straightforward. Going back to Anypoint Studio, and I understand you guys, you have so many different ways on how you can configure stuff. But what you really need to do is, actually I need to find it myself. The only thing you need to do is you need to register our bean within the flow. That I'm sorry, I thought I'm prepared. Now I'm working here. So all you need to do is register our class, our bean, in your Mule XML and turn on the context notification. And the rest will be done by the nJAMS client. I have seen customers doing Maven builds and doing this automatically or using external configuration files. But bottom line is register the nJAMS bean and turn on the context notifications. And that is all you need to do. Obviously, you need to provide a JMS connection, and that can be done using your properties either the Mule app properties when you build this system, or if you use Cloud Hub, you would use the deployment properties and override the values there. So very straightforward, zero code change, no change to your flows, just register the bean and off you go.
Do changes need restarts on tracing, or is it fully automatically?
No, this is all automatic. Whenever you change things, we will pick up the changes automatically. We will update the flow definitions. So the way we, like these flow definitions, they actually are versioned, which means if you change your flow definition and you go back to an historic transaction in the database, it will pull out the historic flow definition and present that. So again, very, very powerful. Allows you to see how your process definitions or your flow definitions evolved over time.
So now we come to the more general questions. What applications and other ESB integration systems do Integration Matters monitor?
Yes. Out of the box, we currently have TIBCO, XY, SAP, databases, files. We have a Java SDK, so you can build your own things. We have a servlet filter, so we can monitor any arbitrary web application. That is what we do out of the box, and we're just looking into the major other players out there, having to say that Mule turns out to become one of the major players in the market.
How does the visualization of the Mule app flows ends up in nJAMS? Do you build the icons of each message processor automatically?
Yes. Actually, what we do is as we hook into the startup of the engine, we actually read the flow definitions straight from the Mule runtime, and we parse through the Mule runtime and render these static graphs automatically. Let me click on a definition so we can see the difference. So when I just click on the definition, you see this is what we statically store in the server after we have parsed the flow from the runtime. And when you actually click on an instance, you will get the overlay with the real transactional data. So nothing needs to be done by the user, just install it and off it goes and works.
Besides the process diagram visualization, what are the other advantages of nJAMS compared to other solutions such as ELK or Splunk?
Yeah, we are frequently asked about like ELK and Splunk. Well, first of all, the little secret is we use the E out of ELK here as our data store. So we use Elasticsearch as the data store. The benefit you get from this solution is, first of all, we take the effort of understanding what your process definition looks like and what your business process looks like, and we automatically evaluate whether a transaction succeeded or failed. We normalize all these information that is provided by the integrated systems into our data format, which is well described and available for our customers to further use. So the value comes from that you do not need to worry about configuring Logstash to parse your payload and provide the information in a way that you then want to probably build Kibana or Splunk on to report of all of that. We do not require you to turn on the verbose logging. I mean, the downside of ELK and Splunk is they can only record and display what ends up in the log file. And if it's not in the log file, it virtually doesn't exist for these tools. But as nJAMS sits in memory with the applications we monitor, we can read all the data we need in order to map out and lay out the transactions without the need for our customers to turn on verbose tracing or change their code to pump out the correct logging information. Just imagine that you have this log file and it is missing the customer number in the log file, but you need that for your reporting. You would have to go back to your application and change the way it logs stuff. So you change your code to satisfy your logging requirement. And we just believe that that isn't right. You shouldn't be forced to change your application in order to get that result. And that is pretty much true to all these solutions like Elk or Splunk or LogLogic or whatever sort of machine data readers are out there. I could go on actually. We provide role-based access, so you can define which piece of data, which subset of data is available to which user. You probably want to say, hey, the Mule thing here, or everything related to Mule is just available to the Mule people in my organization, but for SAP users, I just make available my SAP domain down here. So it's very easy to separate access to the information and secure access there. Yeah, so that is what I would say is the main difference.
Are there any additional apps required, specific databases for the data store with nJAMS?
No, we have two different pieces of data in the database. One is master data, like users, privileges of users, process diagrams. And we have transactional data, which is the real instances you see as results in the middle of the screen here. And that data, because that is massive data, actually is stored in Elasticsearch. We moved away from relational databases because we start seeing customers putting 1 terabyte or more of data a day into our system and report on that. And we haven't been able to tweak the traditional relational databases to cope with that amount of data. So we switched to the NoSQL data store. We're very satisfied. It scales horizontally, very nicely linear scaling here. All the master data is stored in either then Postgres, Microsoft SQL Server, or Oracle. So the smaller data, relational databases, the real massive amount of data goes into Elasticsearch.
Another one, what controls the roles? For example, Active Directory?
Yes, there's two ways you can do that. I'm just switched to the administration screen here, and either you go into your LDAP setting and you sync all your users and your roles using LDAP, and then you can go to the user management roles, and for a role, you can then assign privileges and say, okay, the role called John should have access to, say, the Mule. That's the way how you control now access to various features in the system. So users and roles can be synchronized, including their memberships to roles using LDAP, but privileges need to be assigned in the tool because we don't really want to clutter your LDAP system with our privileges.
So we run out of time, but the last question, can you also monitor cloud hubs, and is there also an nJAMS cloud offering available?
Yes, absolutely. It is actually, we currently run a prototype with one of our prospect customers. We're monitoring Cloud Hub. It's a bit different to monitor a on-premise Mule, but it works 100%, and we haven't seen any side effects. And what we actually do is that Cloud Hub installation of the customer is talking to an nJAMS cloud setup also. So we use Amazon for our cloud offering. It works very nicely together, and we're very satisfied with the results.
Thank you very much, Hendrik. I think that's it for today. If you want to discuss further details or specific questions, contact us for a private online session or connect with us via Twitter or LinkedIn. We will send you tomorrow a link to the recorded session, and there is also the contact information in there. So once again, Hendrik and I want to thank you for joining today's demo, and we would love to see you again, maybe for one of our upcoming demos, and we wish you a good rest of the day. Thank you very much for your participation.
Thanks everybody, and looking forward to speak to you soon.